Let's see. Let's look at the camera here. Yeah. I am pleased to introduce to you my wife of 7 weeks, Judy Schilling.
My guest today is my good friend, Ruth Irvin. She's here for her 3rd visit, and I have submitted her proposal for membership in Boulder Rotary. She is a longtime friend through First United Methodist Church. She knows many people here through activities of the CU Directors Club, and her most recent activity is to get involved with the Colorado Multiple Sclerosis Society. So welcome, Ruth.
Thank you.
Hi, I'd like to introduce my good friend and guest, Alec Volk. He wanted me to introduce him as a truck driver, but he is actually a retired attorney. So, yeah. He and his wife live in California, but they're planning on moving to the Boulder area. And so I'm encouraging them to come to Boulder.
I have 3 guests today. First, Eve Kilmer, who is a psychologist here in Boulder, visiting as a guest. Lloyd Thrall, who was here a few weeks ago, I introduced him at that time, just recently has moved to Boulder to take over a new role as the director of MD5 here at the University of Colorado. And then Lloyd's mother, Gloria, and I'm going to let Lloyd introduce Gloria because he'll see how much trouble he can get into doing that.
My lovely and wonderful mom, Gloria, career educator, high school counselor, author of both counseling books and children's books, and very interested in being involved in the community.
My guest today is Stephanie Palm-Neves. She is the founder and president of Socially Conscious Coffee. It's an NGO that works with coffee small producers in Central America and partners with the communities there to create sustainable solutions to education, health, sanitation, and water. And today we introduced to the World Community Service Committee a new project that the Boulder Club like to sponsor. It's on early childhood development in El Salvador, and Stephanie's NGO is partnering also. So please welcome Stephanie.
Hello. I'd like to introduce Carolyn Schrader. She's actually a visiting Rotarian from the Denver Mile High Club, and she also spoke to our World Community Service Committee today, and has a number of wonderful Zimbabwe projects. Thank you.
Happy Friday, everyone. Really excited to have met 2 Boulder High students earlier this morning. They're visiting Rotary for the first time, Miller and Lila. So I'll let them share a little bit about their high school experience.
Hi, I'm Miller Davison. I am a junior at Boulder High. I am on the varsity basketball team. I'm also involved with Blue Sky Bridge and volunteer for them. I love history and foreign languages and everything involving business. So, yeah.
I'm Lila Gelband. I am also a junior at Boulder High School. I'm assisting our athletic trainer at school. I love to sing. I love working with people and athletes and just, being involved in the community in any way that I can.
Did I get everybody? Well, welcome all of our guests, and please come back again.
Thanks so much, Jean, and to all of you for being here. Peter, if you'd come on down while he's making the long walk upstairs. I idea of making this large club small. There are different opportunities along the way. If you're into fitness, walking with the doc tomorrow morning at East Boulder Rec Center, our Rotarian Dr. Trujillo has been instrumental in that. December 7th, this is on the back of your little yellow agenda. There is a State of the State luncheon in Denver. I know Norris and Terry Hermsmeyer are interested in going. Others might as well. And then on the 6th of January is an opportunity to meet our Rotary International President. And this is part of a polio fundraising event at that time. So I would encourage you to consider any and all of these opportunities. Peter, please.
Good morning, good afternoon. It's my honor to honor some Paul Harris Fellows and also to honor last year's club president. So Bill Meyer, would you come forward first? Every year, the Rotary International President issues a challenge for clubs around the world to donate towards polio eradication. We are so very, very close. There was one more case of polio this week. We are at 15 cases around the world. Last year, we were at 37. So we're still making really, really good progress at eradicating polio. And this certificate honors our club for having reached the challenge of last year's president to donate to the Rotary Foundation. We were one of 29 clubs in the district. We have 62 clubs that met that challenge. So congratulations and thank you very much. So TK, come on up. Would the following Rotarians come forward? Larry Dries and Gary Kahn, Cinda Arsenault, Pam Heinck, and Norma Ekstrand. Is Pam here? Good, okay. We are honoring those club members who have either become a Paul Harris Fellow for the first time or have reached the next level. Paul Harris Fellows are those who have donated $1,000 over a period of time or all at once, either to the annual fund or to the Polio Plus Fund or to a numbered grant. Those are the three ways that you can become a Paul Harris Fellow. You can also use matching points, but that's another issue, not for tonight, for today. So we have 5 to honor today. About a month ago, we honored another 10 Paul Harris Fellows or those that had moved on. So first off, we have 2 brand new Paul Harris Fellows. Larry Dries, congratulations, this is Paul Harris. And we have Gary Kahn, who has also reached Paul Harris status. Your certificate will be in the mail. Okay. Next, we have Cinda Arsenault, who has reached, Cinda Collins Arsenault, I'm sorry, who has reached Paul Harris +1. So congratulations, Cinda. Pam Heinck has reached Paul Harris +4. Congratulations and thank you. And finally, Norma Ekstrand has reached Paul Harris +5. So congratulations. Now I did a little bit of quick math. The sum total of this donation from this group is $25,000. $25,000 converts to almost 42,000 doses of polio vaccine. And with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation 2-to-1 match, that means this group over time has vaccinated over 126,000 children all around the world. So thank you so very much to all of you.
I just want to make a couple additional comments. And can you put my slide up? We have 223 members in this club, give or take 1 or 2. We have 130 Paul Harris Fellows, which is a pretty outstanding record. But we also have 60 people who have not yet participated. So I want to invite you to participate. Because you heard about the polio, and everybody knows quite a bit about that. But up here is a slide that shows you the number of global grants in 2015-16 and the total amount of money, $76 million. And I just want to highlight water for a moment, which is the second item down. And these are ranked in order of the amount of money that was made in the way of grants. So water has been a big project here. We all know about Wine to Water, and we know about Nicaragua. Many of us in this room have participated in the water project in Nicaragua. And on your table is a sheet, the same sheet. You want to give me the next slide? And there's the number 24 on this, on your pieces of paper. That 24 is $24. That's what it takes to bring clean water to one person. We can do more. We are doing a lot in the water area, and I want to invite those who haven't yet participated in the Paul Harris, polio, or any one of these 6 avenues of service to consider that this holiday season. Thank you. Thank you.
We're going to shift gears now for some new members turning red. So Gary, if you and Fred would come forward, and Tom and Carl, please. They haven't turned blue yet. They're just going to be red first.
So it is my pleasure today to introduce to you, if you haven't met him already, Fred Hull. You should have met him by now because he's spent the last several weeks, maybe I guess a few months now, in service to our meeting management program, even though he wasn't committed to actually becoming a Rotarian. And after giving us a good hard look, he accepted my proposal to propose him as a member, so we're very lucky that he's with us. Fred moved to Boulder from Southern California, where he was born and educated in 1981. I found out yesterday that he'd actually spent a lot of time in the scouting out there and actually became an Eagle Scout. So he received his bachelor's and master's in electrical engineering from UCLA. And while still in school, he joined an organization known as Perceptronics, which was an engineering research company focused on projects in human factors and robotics, and remained with that company for 6 years before becoming vice president of engineering for a company in the early days of personal computers, where he supervised the integration and testing of the computers for small business and personal use. And as I said, in 1981, he took a ride with a friend to Colorado and decided to stay. So in 2 years ago, 2015, he retired from a 30-year career as president of Visual Communications Group and as a partner in XCal Visual with my lovely wife, Shawnee, who's with us today also. And he served in every capacity they had in all the creative work, including script writing and directing, editing, productions of that where they did video training on environmental health and safety topics. In addition, he not only assumed the duties as a general manager of this 12-person business, but he took responsibility for the internal information technology and implementation and maintenance. Fred is co-author of a technical book on audio sweetening for film and television. And in addition, he is very passionate about a few things, including sports, which includes beating me at racquetball regularly, but also especially basketball, and also craft beer, where he took a turn now and then at home brewing, and rock music, especially the Grateful Dead, for you deadheads out there. He's a talented handyman who recently has been helping his brother, who lives in hygiene, remodel his home that was almost destroyed in the flood. And it is with a great deal of pleasure that I give you our next Rotarian, Fred Hull.
This next induction is going to be slightly different because Carl is going to be a split personality, sorta. So Tom, if you would do half of it, and then Nora's come up and do the other half, please.
I'm pleased to do the front half of this presentation of my good friend Carl T. Kurtz. He's now joining our club as a Red Badge member. He's very fortunate to be married to one of our members already, Janet Beersley, so we're pleased that he's joining her in the club. They have 4 children and 5 grandchildren. Carl received his AB degree from Oberlin College, then earned his PhD at Washington University in St. Louis. He has taught political science at the University of Georgia. He's worked on the staff of the U.S. Congress as a congressional fellow of the American Political Science Association. He's also been very active in the Boulder community, serving as a member and chair of the Boulder County Board of Adjustment and the Boulder County Planning Commission. He's very active in our church, the First Congregational Church UCC of Boulder. He served as moderator of the church, twice chair of the Board of Management, and most recently chair of our search for a new associate pastor. He's well known nationally and internationally for his organizational skills, and he also runs meetings on time. I am pleased to introduce Carl as the Red Badge member of our Boulder Rotary Club.
I've been in Boulder Rotary a number of years, and this is the first time I remember inducting a new member and then calling on him to be to go to work and do the presentation right away. Carl is the principal of a company called Legis Matters, a consulting firm that focuses on strengthening democratic institutions, especially legislatures at home and abroad. For 39 years, he worked for the National Conference of State Legislatures in Denver from its founding in 1975 until his retirement in 2014. Carl has written, consulted, and lectured widely on American state legislatures, elections, and public opinion. He is co-author of Republic on Trial, The Case for Representative Democracy, and co-editor of Institutional Change in American Politics, The Case of Term Limits. He has provided advice and assistance in the development of democratic institutions to legislatures and legislative bodies throughout the world. As a consultant to the National Conference and State Legislatures, Carl has recently led a national study of how legislatures can overcome problems of political polarization and effectively reach settlements through negotiation of those critical issues. Please welcome Carl to the podium.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. It's a pleasure for me to be here and truly an honor to be welcomed into membership in the Boulder Rotary Club. And I am doubly honored to be able to speak with you on the day that I am admitted into membership. Thanks. So I'm going to be reporting to you today on a 3-year project that I have been involved with. sponsored by the National Conference of State Legislatures. But before I do that, I want to say just a few words about the National Conference, NCSL, as it's known, because most of you probably don't know a lot about it. It is a bipartisan organization, and by bipartisan, I mean we work equally for Democrats and for Republicans. And it serves all 50 states. It's headquartered in Denver with an office in Washington, D.C., but we don't work any more for the Colorado legislature than we do for the Alaska legislature or the Florida legislature. So it just happens that we are in Denver, and while I'm retired from it, please forgive me if I still call it we. So NCSL has three basic purposes. One is the sharing of information and ideas among the states, so that if you were a legislator in Maine dealing with, let's say, the opioid crisis, and you wanted to know what other states were doing, you could come to NCSL and find out 3 states have approached this problem in one way, 4 in another, and another 6 still in a third way. And that kind of, the desire for that information explains in many ways the existence of the organization. The second major purpose is lobbying the federal government on behalf of the states. So, for example, on the tax bill that is currently before the Congress, NCSL is very vigorously lobbying against the elimination of the deduction of state and local taxes, because it will have a major impact on state taxation. And then the third major function is improving the quality and effectiveness of state legislatures. And that, in my time at NCSL, I did lots of different things, but my passion was always strengthening the institution, trying to study how it works, how to make it better, and educating the public about what legislatures do. So this project was supported by the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation, and their interest in it is they have something called the Madison Fund. They've set aside $50 million for addressing the problem of political polarization in Congress. And right before I retired from NCSL in 2014, I put together a proposal to the Hewlett Foundation with the premise that Congress is just one of 51 legislatures in the United States. And maybe Congress has something to learn from what state legislatures do. So we were awarded that grant, and I was able then to lead that as a consultant after I retired. So let's get to it a little bit. So I just thought, I'd like to hear from you. When you hear Congress, give me an adjective that occurs to you. Shout it out. What's that? Paralyzed. Okay. Another one. What's that? Dysfunctional. Irresponsible. How about the back of the room? Polarized. Great. Okay. Well, here's my list. Pretty much the same one, right? Let's talk about that last one, polarized. What do we mean by polarized? Well, our functional definition of polarization is that the two political parties are ideologically distant from each other and they are internally consistent. So it's pretty much all the Democrats and pretty much all the Republicans are spread apart. Now, the public and the media frequently often intertwines the notion of polarization with policymaking and civility. But incivility and gridlock are not inevitable products of polarization. In fact, it's possible to be ideologically polarized and yet still negotiate agreements on policy, just as it's possible to be polarized yet respectful and civil. So these don't necessarily go together. Okay, the central finding of our 3 years of research on this subject confirmed our premise, which is that the state legislatures operate in the same polarized political world as the Congress does. And yet most of them consistently are able to negotiate their differences and enact public policy. So I'm going to be spending the rest of my time with you talking about why that might be the case. So how did we go about doing the study? We chose 10 very diverse state legislatures from across the country, 3 in the Northeast, Maine, Massachusetts, and Connecticut, Virginia and Tennessee in the South, Minnesota, Iowa, and Wisconsin in the Midwest, and Colorado and Washington in the West. And because we started this project in 2015, and we were particularly interested in the comparison between state legislatures and the Congress at the time was operated under divided government. That is, we had a Democratic president and a Republican Congress. So we particularly wanted to pick out states with divided government, and divided government being defined as at least one house of the legislature being of the opposite party of the governor. So we went out and spent a week at each one of these state capitals interviewing legislators, legislative staff, lobbyists, reporters, trying to figure out what the history was, what worked, why it worked, and why it didn't. So what did we find? Well, first of all, we did find that they are indeed polarized. In particular, we found a significant fear of being challenged within your own party in the next primary election. And this was particularly true among Republican legislators who worry that if they do anything to negotiate with the other side or to compromise on issues, it may lead to primary opposition from the right. And that primary opposition is often identified with the Tea Party. Many of you may remember back in 2014, the majority leader of the United States House of Representatives, Eric Cantor from Virginia. Cantor is a very conservative fellow, but he was a deal maker. He was willing to negotiate things and get things done. And all of a sudden, he got challenged by this totally unknown college professor, had never been in politics before, and here the majority leader was defeated in the primary. Well, this sent shockwaves through the Republican Party, not just at the congressional level, but at the state legislative level. And we found lots of examples like this around the country where there had been very significant primary defeats of moderate Republicans. My favorite story is about a longtime Tennessee moderate Republican member, Representative Dennis Roach. He is a high school teacher and a wrestling coach when he's not in the legislature, and he's universally known in his district and in the legislature as Coach Roach. So he was defeated in a primary election that came out of the blue by a candidate who described himself as more pro-life than your pastor, more for the Second Amendment than Davy Crockett, and more for traditional marriage than Adam and Eve. So this is a problem not just for the Republicans, but Democrats have their own problem with moderates and moderation, especially in states where Democrats have had very significant declines in the number of members in the legislature over the last 10 years. In the South, in particular, the Democrats who are left tend to be the ones who are from the inner city or from urban districts. And the result is the same for them as it is for the Republicans. It's a more homogeneous caucus that is less willing to negotiate or compromise with the other side. So many legislators told us that the polarization in the legislature is caused by the voters. Now, political scientists don't all agree on this subject. Some of them say that, yeah, that's true. Polarized public leads to polarized behavior by elected officials. But others argue that it's the other way around, that it's the polarized behavior of the elected officials that leads the public to be more polarized. But there is significant evidence of polarization among the public. In these three graphs over a 20-year period of time by the Pew Research Center that shows that on a 10-point scale of 10 political values consistent over these 20 years, back in, the wrong button. In 1994 and again in 2004, the median Democrat and the distance between the median Democrat and the median Republican, this is the public, not the legislators, was very narrow. But you come to 2014 and you find that this gap has widened very significantly. So there has been public polarization. Now, this slide, I know you're not going to be able to read, but I can make the basic point of it. This is two political scientists, Boris Shore and Nolan McCarty, have developed a scale of polarization of the members of state legislatures. And this line right here represents the Congress, which on their scale scores about 1.2. Anything, and the further to the right you are on this scale, the greater the degree of polarization. And the states that are in yellow there are our 10 case study states. And you can see that most of the state legislatures, the members are more polarized than the members of Congress are. And we aren't going to spend any time on this, but look right up here is Colorado as the second most in this. Actually, the same political scientists did a study for 2016, I think, and by then Colorado had passed California and was the most polarized state legislature. But despite all of this evidence of polarization, we found consistent evidence of an ability by state legislatures to negotiate their differences and to compromise and to enact laws. This was particularly true on state budgets, which are the most significant bills that legislatures pass in almost every state. It's the most important bill of the year. On big transportation issues, just in the 2015 that we were looking at, Virginia, Iowa, Washington, all three passed very significant highway improvement bills that involved increasing the gas tax. And they did that despite the generally anti-tax Republicans being present there. On higher education issues, there was a lot of compromise and negotiation. Where it appeared to be more difficult was sort of on the national hot button issues, like Common Core in education that the Obama administration was promoting and Republicans chose to oppose. And the biggest hot button of all of the last 10 years, healthcare, we did find that it was more difficult to negotiate differences there. So let's turn to factors that appear to mitigate the negative effects of polarization. And let's start with constitutions and rules. 42 of the 50 states have fixed adjournment dates. That is, you will adjourn by, in some cases, only a month. In some cases, like Colorado, about 5 months. And having a fixed adjournment date forces timely action and prevents procrastination if you're going to get anything done. Part-time citizen legislators, most in all but a dozen states, you can't make a living being a state legislator. You have to have some other source of income. And so these are people who live in their communities. They go to the Capitol for a few months and they come back and they're part of their community. And this is tied to both of these topics. 3/4 of the states have fairly effective deadline systems. So by a certain date, all bills have to be introduced, and by another date, all bills have to be considered in committee. And so it goes through the whole process until conference committee. And these deadlines help speed things along and avoid procrastination and encourage deal making, which in my vocabulary is a good thing. And it promotes negotiation and compromise. Single subject rules. There are 40 of the states have constitutional requirements that a bill can only address a single subject. And so it prevents kind of loading up what Congress used to call Christmas tree bills. You know, just you keep adding amendments to a bill in order to gain supporters for the bill. And most of the states are pretty good at following this. Balanced budget requirements, another thing that forces action on the single most important bill of any legislative session. But maybe above all, what legislators told us made a difference was the fair and consistent application of rules. That if the minority party understood what the rules were, the majority party would follow those rules and not just take advantage of their majority to suddenly completely change the rules because they weren't working for them. Something that tends to happen in Congress, which these days doesn't follow their own rules very much at all. So having the fair and consistent application of rules helps to build trust. It's an assurance to the minority party that rules and procedures will be followed. So then going on to less tangible things than the rules and the constitutions, committee systems are very, very important. Committees and legislatures do most of the hard work. In a well-functioning committee system, committees give a fair hearing to all sides. They deliberate on the merits of each proposal. They allow active participation by the minority party. And the committees function to screen legislation for the rest of the members. And again, here's on this topic, Congress, in my view, has fallen short in recent years. Leadership is another really important part of this. We had a wonderful quote from a Minnesota Senate majority leader who said, the legislative session is like a giant jigsaw puzzle. What's the first thing you do with a jigsaw puzzle? You look at the picture on the front of the box to see how the pieces fit together. Good leaders help people see how the pieces fit together. So we had great examples in Washington State of where they, maybe 10, 15 years ago, they'd had a tied chamber. Their House of Representatives had been tied. and they developed something they called the no surprise rule. And it was basically that leaders of both parties would regularly consult with each other. They would let them know what was going on. The majority maybe was going to take advantage of their power in the majority, but they were going to let the minority know about it, and that it would be a transparent process. Well, that worked so well in that tied session that they've adopted that ever since, and they've actually made it that they have a no surprise rule in the rules of the legislature. And also in Washington, they make it a practice to pass bills that are sponsored by minority legislators. And they look for how can we be inclusive of the minority party. Governors are the single most powerful actors in the legislative process because they set the agenda, submit a budget as a starting point, and use their high visibility as a bully pulpit to influence public opinion. Their effectiveness is heavily dependent on their personal skills and characteristics. Now, governors, most of them like to leave a legacy. You know, they're in there for 4 years or 8 years, or and they want to leave something behind. And so most of them, they might have extreme views, but they tend to moderate them, and they're willing to negotiate in order to achieve that that legacy. So I'm going to speed up here. Less tangible things, I'll just talk about the "we're not DC" part of this slide. We heard that in virtually every state, that legislators all the time compare themselves to the Congress, and they take pride. We're not DC, you know, we're not gridlocked, we get things done. And personal trust is probably the single most important element. When you think about it, trust is needed for many of the factors that mitigate the effects of political polarization that I've already talked about, like treating the minority party fairly, empowering committees, developing personal relationships, fostering effective relationships between leaders and governors. So, in our interviews, legislators often told us that a willingness to compromise was key to getting things done, to making public policy. We did a national survey of all state legislators over there on the right, and you can see that compared to the data from the general public, state legislators are much more oriented toward Congress than the public is. There were significant differences here between Democrats and Republicans. Democrats were more oriented to compromise, more favorable to compromise than Republicans. But still, the Republicans were much farther toward the compromise is essential end of the scale. So in the interest of time, I'm not going to talk about this at all. If I had more time, I'd talk about some of these factors that legislators told us exacerbate the problems of polarization. And I'd also talk to you, you know, I don't want to be Pollyanna-ish here, because there are examples in state legislatures where they've become gridlocked and stalemated as well. But we'll save that for another time, maybe. So let me just wrap up here by saying that I've spent nearly 50 years studying, supporting, and advocating for representative democracy. I am a passionate believer that representative democracy works, not perfectly, but better than any conceivable alternative. And I guess, you know, I am a bit idealistic. And I can become cynical, though, like many of you probably are, and the general public is, about the legislative process. I can go through periods where I'm disappointed in what my own legislature did or what I'm observing in Washington. You know, in those 50 years, I've gone through periods like that. And I was in one of those periods in the early 1990s when I had the opportunity to go to Brazil to work with the state legislature in Rio Grande do Sul, which is way down in the southern part of Brazil, next to the Uruguay border. And when I walked up to the Legislative Assembly building there, I saw this enormous sign that says, Povo sem parlamento e povo escravo. Now, unfortunately, I don't speak any Portuguese, so I had to have a translation, which is, people without parliament are people in chains. And I thought to myself, aha, you know, that's why I do what I do. That's sort of the underpinning of my belief in the system. Another way of saying it is that the role of Parliament, the role of the legislature, is to protect the rights and the freedom of the people. So it's been a delight for me to be here with you, and I welcome any questions you might have, assuming we've got time, Marty. Okay, and does somebody have a microphone for the questions, or do we shout them out?
I can speak loud. In your exacerbating factors, you did not mention gerrymandering. Is that because gerrymandering is not a problem?
Well, I'm a little bit of an iconoclast on that subject. Yeah, I think there are problems with gerrymandering in the modern age. The tools are so sophisticated that it is possible to do it. But in fact, there are academic studies that show that it doesn't add all that much to the division between the two sides. So, yeah.
Talk a little bit about money and politics and how you see that.
Okay.
Federal level.
Sure. Question is about the role of money in politics. Again, I'm a little bit of an iconoclast on that subject. Look at what General Motors or Toyota does to sell a car, or General Mills does to sell cereal. You know, it's about 50 times what any candidate spends to win an election. But yeah, and I don't mean to downgrade it, I just want to put it in perspective. And I think, yes, when we have unlimited campaign giving, as they have in some states, and it can make legislators more responsive to the donors, but for the most part, my observation would be that that really affects only the relatively marginal issues. On the big issues that legislators have their own firm beliefs about, they don't change them all that much. And I think the issue gets overblown a little bit. My favorite example is back when George Bush and Dick Cheney were elected president and vice president. Both of them had spent their careers in the oil industry. And when they got elected, one of the first things they did was to introduce a pro-energy bill, pro-fossil fuel bill, and the newspapers all came out and said, these guys are bought and sold by the energy industry. Well, duh. They'd spent their whole careers there. We knew that when we elected them. So, you know, I just throw out the possibility that money follows votes rather than votes following money. That the money supports the people who are already on your side.
Dark money is what bothers me. You don't know who's giving them. I mean, you know, and obviously the amount doesn't have the effect.
So,
you don't know who's giving them.
Dorothy's here to cut this short. Let me just say I agree with you, and I'm a huge advocate of campaign finance disclosure.
It is a real privilege for me today because I've had respect and admiration and appreciation and gratitude for you through the years. You were exceedingly fair and helpful in those of us serving in the House and the Senate. So I want to thank you for that, Carl. And I'm glad you're a part of this group. And I get to do this. I get to say to you, in your name, the Boulder Rotary Club is pleased to donate 100 doses of vaccine to the Polio Plus Club. And I do thank you very, very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Carl asked you all about what you thought about Congress, and on the bottom of the little yellow agenda is Will Rogers' version of what it does. So strange. A man gets up to speak, says nothing, nobody listens, and then everybody disagrees. Okay, Mike, now we're going to a different slate of officers.
On December 8th, you have the opportunity to vote for your president-elect nominee and for 4 of the 8 board nominees. Between now and December 8th, on your tables are the biographies of the 8 nominees and the president-elect nominee. Also in the cyber rib, you will have a link to this, and there's a video where they introduce themselves. So I highly encourage you to go and pay attention to that. Between now and then, if you are going to be absent on December 8th, you can email in your vote to the secretary. George Browning is the guy, taking all those. It is secretary@boulderrotary.org. And this will also be in the cyber rib, and we'll remind you a couple more times. So you can vote in absentee, because we really want to have good participation. So now I would like to say their names and have them stand up. So our president-elect nominee, John Sullivan, stand up. All right, and have a seat. All righty. Board of Director nominees, Kaya Belkis. Oh, he had to leave. Okay. Rich Baez, not here. Nancy Chin Wagner in Singapore. I follow her on Facebook. Erin Doherty Rattay. There she is. Okay. Paul Jurdy. I know you're here. Yeah. Lindsay Sachs. Bob Taylor. And Doug Geiser. Doug is not here. Okay. You get to vote for 4 of those 8. Top getters get the opportunity to serve you starting July 1st this next year. Thank you.
Okay, let's go to... Sing along here. Daryl, can you narrate this from a distance? It's like a silent movie.
I can do the thing, but no sound. I don't know what's up.
We'll just hum along.
Annual State of the Luncheon and Mental Health Symposium Thursday, December 7th. Speakers include Governor John Hickenlooper and Susan Siebold, mother of Dylan Siebold, one of the two Columbine shooters. Mental Health Wellbeing Symposium will precede the luncheon. District 5450 saves the date. RI President Dinner and Polio Fundraiser, January 6th, 2018. Share a gift. Once again, this holiday project will provide toys, books, and bikes for the less fortunate. 2,100 children received gifts last year. Donate underwrapped toys and gifts on December 1st, 8th, and 15th at our club. Meetings or volunteer. Contact Joanne Joslin for more information. Join the next Rotaract meeting. The next CU Rotaract meeting will be on November 28th from 6 to 7 p.m. at the Humanitarian Building at the CU. Last meeting of the semester. Has great success. Rotary Club members. WCSC supporting Denver 31 project. Your World Community Service Committee is supporting a project headed by Denver Club 31 to improve literacy and educational opportunities for disadvantaged high school girls, mainly gypsies, Roma, and to teach them to resist recruitment into sweatshop and sex slavery scams. BRC Book Club update. After a very successful discussion of polio, an American story last month, the Boulder Rotary Club has scheduled its next meeting. Darla Schuth will host at her home. She has chosen the book, The Death and Life of the Great Lakes by Dan Egan. The Boulder Rotary Club is a sponsor of the Empathy and Impact Benefit on November 18th, 2017, 7 p.m. at E-Town Hall to bring awareness to major human rights issues, human trafficking, and modern-day slavery. Rotary International has made this an issue of focus worldwide, and we hope to have as many Rotarians as possible attend this event. Next week's program, we are not having one. We're dark for Thanksgiving. What is that? Have a great weekend.
Can you go to birthday? Okay, Dr. George.
Hello. Welcome to the happiest and best table to sit at on a Friday afternoon at Boulder Rotary. This is the birthday table, and we have some people we're going to recognize today. Bill Arnold is here. He joined the club in 1953, and of course the big Ford dealership. Bill, happy birthday.
Does that entitle me to say something?
We're just glad you're here.
Well, you know, I know quite a few of you, but most of you I don't know anymore because I don't come like I should. Anyway, glad to be here. You all don't sing anymore here, huh?
We're going to sing.
R-O-T-A-R-Y, that spells Rotary. R-O-T-A-R-Y, sun, north, land, and sea. From north to south to east to west, he profits most who serves the best. R-O-T-A-R-Y, that spells Rotary.
We have a stranger here among us, brought in the club by Norma Ekstrand, Jim Morton.
First of all, Norma, it's good to see you. Bruce was my real sponsor. Bruce was a mentor of mine. One of the reasons I came today was another mentor of mine 50 years ago, and I didn't really even remember this was my birthday. Dorothy Rupert, she's not only my counselor, she was not only my English teacher, but she ran a leadership class. Why it's very germane that we had this on the legislature. And we know all about her service. I was president of the student body then, and she taught us one basic thing I can take away, and that's to listen first and then be understood. And that stayed with me all through my career, all through my time in public life. But let me just end by two things. First of all, the circle of life in Rotary is apparent. You begin with a paper tag as a name tag as a guest. Then you go to a red tag, name tag, and then you go to a blue name tag, and then you come back to a paper name tag. So all I hope is that I wasn't charged for my meal because I'm a guest. Now, the only reason you want me to stay away, and I'll end with this, is the last time I came to Rotary, the stock market was at 10,100. So if I stay away long enough, you'll reap the benefits of my lack of presence. Thank you.
Zach Mosley was brought in the club by Abigail Stang, Classification Design Creative Services. The matriarch of Boulder Rotary, Genji Patterson, joined the club back in 1988, Classification Retail. And then we have Nancy Geyer, who joined the club in 2005. James Swaby brought her in the club. She's a nonprofit Boulder History Museum. Danny Landau, brought in the club by Valerie Simpson, Real Estate. Happy birthday, Danny.
Well, thank you very much. We're running out of time, but I knew it was my birthday coming up because I saw Bill Arnold.
Merrill Glustrom joined the club in 2015. He's an author. Tim Johnson, brought in the club by Cassidy Murphy, Government and County. Carl Kurtz, our speaker today. He was brought in the club by Tom Steers. Marlene Wojcik. Brought in the club, by Diana Smith, community volunteer. Eric Danzer, sponsored by John Kotke, e-commerce. And Alan Fields, sponsored by Jim Hannafin, and printing and publishing. And that's happy birthday. Be sure to sit at the birthday table. This is how we fund our scholarships. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Happy weekend, happy Thanksgiving, and we'll see you next month.